You have to reverse engineer it, right? So you have to start with one of the most sensitive questions that you can ask anybody. And it's basically, are you living check to check? Because that's our ideal prospect, right? So how do we ask them without being so rude? And you basically reverse engineer it. So in other words, how do I ask you how much do you have in your checking and savings? I'm going to ask you, number one, how much do you actually net your net income? How much of your net income do you net at the end of every month? So in other words, well, how do I even get there? Well, you got to ask, well, how much do you make gross in order to figure out the net, right? And then you ask, okay, well, what would that matter? And then you move backwards even a little bit further and say, okay, well, I got to be talking about debt in order to open up the conversation of income. Does that make sense? So then you start with debt. So that's why one of the very first questions I ever ask is, besides this mortgage, on your credit report, what other debts are open? Is it just the mortgage, or do you have revolving debt? Yeah, I got some credit cards, right? A lot of them do have credit cards. Now, it's either going to go in two different directions. Number one is they're going to say, I only got about maybe $2,000 in credit card debt. This is a sign that they know how to handle their finances. So now you're starting to switch up the dialogue of the conversation, talking about maybe shortening the term, cutting off years off the life of their loan. So maybe you would pivot to, the property, do you plan to retire here? How long have you owned it? You should have your property profile up anyway to know how long they've owned it, right? So if you find out that they owe about $2,000 in credit card debt, then I'm shifting my focus of debt consolidation to maybe shortening the life of their loan. So going from like a 30 to maybe a 20, right? Or if they don't intend to retire here, maybe they could fix up the property. So I'm asking questions like, on a scale of 1 through 10, how do you rate the condition of your house, right? And they say, I rated an 8. Okay. And what do you think you could do to the home to make it a 10? And then they start announcing things and say, okay, and do you intend to retire here? No. Okay, got it. When do you plan to sell if you did sell? 3 years. Now I could put 2 and 2 together and say, okay, I can give you cash to turn that into a 10 before you sell it. Does that make sense? Right. Or enjoy at least the quality of the property in the interim while you live there, so you could reap more benefit in case you decided to sell it a little bit sooner. So ultimately what you're doing is you're just finding ways to kind of corner them, as opposed to talk about and update and educate them about the market. Because that will leave you to where a lot of people are just going to talk to you just for information. And you're not really going to come out with anything from it. So they can get the information elsewhere, or they can get the information from us if they earn that time, right? So I think that just by making those small tweaks, you'll get more engagement, or at least more the momentum that you want. Because if the faster you can identify whether or not you can even deliver a solution to them, the faster you can get off the phone, right? But don't let the rate or the market be what influences that conversation, right? You got to dig a little bit deeper than that.